Imagine being awakened in the dead of night by the sound of chains and shouts. Your home, once safe, is stormed by armed men. You're seized, bound, and dragged away, your cries swallowed by the darkness. You march for days, barefoot, beaten and starving. The faces of your family, your mother, your children, disappear behind you, lost forever. At the end of this march, you see it. An ocean stretching beyond the horizon and a ship waiting. A prison of wood and iron. You're forced inside, crammed with hundreds of others. The stench of sweat, blood, and death fills the air. Some won't survive the night, some will never touch land again. This is not the story of one person. It is the story of millions. The transatlantic slave trade, a system built on unimaginable suffering, yet resisted with unbreakable resilience. For over 4 centuries, the Atlantic Ocean became more than a sea. It became a graveyard and a highway of human bondage. More than 12 million African men, women, and children were captured, chained, and forced across its waves. But this is more than a history of cruelty. It is also a story of survival. Despite brutality, enslaved Africans carried their languages, their traditions, and their spirit. In whispered prayers, in the rhythm of songs, in the stories passed down to children, they declared, "We are still here." The story began in the 15th century, when European empires hungered for the riches of the so-called New World. They needed labor, endless, cheap, disposable labor, and they turned their eyes toward Africa. At first, the trade was small, but soon Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and the Netherlands created a vast machine of human trafficking. Millions of people were reduced to property, bought and sold as though their lives meant nothing. By the 18th century, the trade had become a global industry. To Europe's rulers, Africans were no longer human. They were cargo. The road to slavery began with terror, raids on villages at dawn, families ripped apart, men, women, and children shackled together, forced to march for days. Some were taken as prisoners of war. Others were betrayed by rivals, even sold by local leaders to foreign traders. They marched hundreds of miles toward the coast, many collapsing from exhaustion or hunger along the way. Those who survived were confined in massive coastal fortresses, Elmina, Cape Coast, Goree. Inside these dungeons, people were packed in suffocating darkness, surrounded by disease and despair. For many, these walls were the last they would ever see of home. Then came the most feared chapter, the Middle Passage. Across the Atlantic, Africans were packed into ships under conditions so horrific they defy imagination. Shackled in rows, bodies pressed together, unable to move. The air thick with sweat, blood, and human waste. Disease spread quickly. Dysentery, fever, smallpox. At least 2 million souls never made it across. Their bodies were cast into the waves, claimed by the sea. Some chose to leap overboard, choosing death over bondage. Olaudah Equiano, a survivor, remembered it this way. The shrieks of the women and the groans of the dying rendered the whole a scene of horror, almost inconceivable. Survival of the crossing did not mean freedom. A new nightmare began upon arrival. Africans were forced onto auction blocks, stripped and examined like cattle. Families torn apart, children wrenched from mothers, husbands sold without wives. For the enslaved, separation was permanent. On plantations, life was relentless. From dawn to dusk, enslaved men and women harvested cotton, cut cane, and planted tobacco under the overseer's whip. Punishments were cruel, resistance met with violence, and yet within this suffering, they endured. Through prayer, through song, through the preservation of culture, they clung to humanity. In the beat of drums, in the rhythm of their voices, Africa survived. Enslaved Africans did not surrender. They resisted in silence, in sabotage, and in open revolt. The most powerful rebellion came in Haiti. In 1791, enslaved Africans rose up against French rule. Against all odds, they defeated Napoleon's armies. Led by Toussaint Louverture and later Jean-Jacques Dessalines, they built the first free black republic in the New World. The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves across the globe, proving that freedom was never a gift. It was a right to be fought for. But why did slavery persist for so long? The answer was simple: profit. Sugar, cotton, tobacco. These were the lifeblood of European empires. The wealth of cities like London, Liverpool, New York, and Bordeaux was built on the suffering of enslaved Africans. Every grand building, every thriving bank, every booming market, beneath them all lay chains and blood. The slave trade was not just an industry, it was the foundation of modern global wealth. Behind Europe's luxury was Africa's devastation. By the late 1700s, the system began to crack. Voices of survivors like Olaudah Equiano spread across Europe, awakening public outrage. Abolitionists, both black and white, rose to challenge the trade. Britain banned the trade in 1807. Others slowly followed. But the fight was far from over. Enslavement itself lasted decades longer, until 1833 in the British colonies, 1865 in the United States, and as late as 1888 in Brazil. Even when chains were broken, the scars of slavery endured. The transatlantic slave trade reshaped the world. It tore millions from their homes, scattering them across the Americas. But out of that pain emerged resilience and new cultures. From gospel to jazz, reggae to samba, the African spirit lived on in music, dance, and faith. Yet the legacy also carries injustice, racism, inequality, and systems of oppression that still echo today. To understand our present, we must confront this past. Slavery was not an accident. It was a system, one that shaped nations and identities for generations. The transatlantic slave trade remains one of history's darkest chapters. Yet even within the horror, it revealed the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Every whispered song, every act of defiance, every soul that endured, they testify that humanity cannot be erased. To remember this story is not only to mourn, it is to honor those who resisted, survived, and left a legacy of resilience. Their voices still echo across oceans, reminding us of a simple truth: freedom is never given. It is fought for, and it must always be protected.